John Smith had always been a seeker of truths, a scribe who crafted words into weapons. As a war correspondent during the colossal upheaval of the Second World War, he found himself ensconced in the chaos of the Pacific Theater, where the air was thick with the scent of salt and the weight of impending conflict. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a fiery orange hue over the landscape, lending a surreal quality to the grim reality that surrounded him. Upon stepping onto the rugged shores of Guadalcanal, John felt the tremors of tension beneath his feet. The island had transformed into a battleground, a chessboard littered with the remnants of war and whispers of strategy that reverberated through the air. The vibrant greenery was marred by the scars of conflict, a stark contrast to the beauty of nature that once characterized this paradise. With every step, he could sense the pulse of the soldiers around him, an electric mixture of fear, determination, and the indomitable spirit of survival. "Where do you think we fit into all this?" John muttered to himself as he observed a group of American soldiers gathering their equipment, their laughter masking the fears that lurked just beneath the surface. He had come here to document the war, yet uncertainty tugged at his conscience. Was he merely a witness to history, or did he hold a responsibility that transcended the simplistic role of observer? As he made his way through the camp, John reflected on the meticulous preparations for the battle that loomed on the horizon. He was aware that the Japanese military had formulated a new strategy known as Kantai Kessen, a decisive plan aimed to cripple the American naval forces and secure supremacy in the Pacific. This concept could shatter the fragile balance of power, and John's journalistic instincts ignited within him a burning curiosity. How could such a confident military approach lead them into the jaws of disaster? The tension in the air was palpable, and the whispers among the troops suggested that the American command understood the stakes. Rumors swirled around the strategy's boldness, but it was cloaked in secrecy, with only fragments of information available to those outside the inner circle. John knew he had to dig deeper to unravel the layers of this military enigma. As the war correspondent, his role was to chronicle the fight, but what if he could uncover the psychological warfare that was as potent as the battles themselves? His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Captain Michael Thornton, a battle-hardened officer whose reputation preceded him. His steely gaze reflected the seriousness of their circumstances, and when he approached John, there was an urgency in his demeanor. "Smith, I need you to come with me. There's something you should see," the captain urged. Curiosity piqued. John nodded and followed him to a makeshift command center. Inside, the air was thick with a mixture of anxiety and determination. Maps sprawled across tables, dotted with markers that indicated troop movements and potential points of engagement. The atmosphere was electric as officers engaged in heated discussions about the implications of the Kantai Kessen strategy. "Here's the thing, John," Captain Thornton began, his voice steady but laced with concern. "The Japanese believe they can take us by surprise. They think their new approach will outmaneuver us completely. But we suspect they may be underestimating our resolve." John leaned forward, captivated by the unfolding narrative. With each revelation, he felt the weight of his responsibility as a reporter. This was not merely about battles and statistics, it was a story about lives intertwined with fate, courage, and the brutal realities of war. "Are you saying they have a plan that could potentially backfire?" John asked, his skepticism mingling with intrigue. "Exactly. They're confident, perhaps too confident," Michael replied, his brow creasing with worry. "The bigger the plan, the more vulnerable they become. We just need to find the cracks in their armor before they can execute their strategy." As John listened intently, he realized that this conflict was not merely fought on the battlefield. It was a battle of wits, beliefs, and expectations. The Japanese forces, brimming with confidence, had embraced their plan, but John couldn't shake the sense that something darker lurked beneath the surface. He felt compelled to pursue the truth, even if it meant navigating hazardous waters. Before he could ask his next question, the command center was interrupted by a frantic officer bursting through the door, urgency painted across his face. "Captain, we have new intel. The Japanese fleet is mobilizing sooner than we anticipated." The room fell silent, the gravity of the news settling over them like a thick fog. John's heart raced. It was just as he suspected. The tide of the war was shifting, and he could feel the impending storm brewing just beyond the horizon. The confident strategy of the Japanese was no longer a mere discussion, but an imminent reality. As discussions erupted anew among the officers, John caught a glimpse of the map spread across the table, the symbols marking territories and the lines denoting potential battle routes. It was a vivid representation of the stakes at play, and as he scrutinized the intricacies, a sense of determination surged within him. He had a job to do, but more importantly, he had a story to uncover. "This is bigger than any single battle," John thought, the weight of the situation saturating his mind. He had to uncover what lay behind the Kantai-Kessen strategy, to understand the heart of the enemy's plan and the potential for their downfall. As the meeting continued, John's resolve solidified. He would not remain a passive observer. He had to immerse himself in this chaotic landscape to seek the truth hidden beneath layers of confidence, strategy, and fear. As he stepped back into the humid air of Guadalcanal, John could feel the tension laying siege to the island. The conflict wasn't just about geography, it was about ideologies, hopes, and the human spirit. With the upcoming battles looming, he felt the pull of destiny weaving its thread through the fabric of his mission. And so, dear listener, if you want to accompany John Smith on this journey, witnessing the trials of war and uncovering the secrets that lie deep within the heart of conflict, subscribe to the channel. Join us as we delve into the depths of history, exploring the stories that shape our world. The next chapter awaits, and the tides of war are about to shift. Stay with us as we unravel the fabric of fate, one thread at a time. John Smith felt the electric hum of uncertainty resonate within him as he left the command center with Captain Thornton's words echoing in his mind. The impending confrontation between American and Japanese forces was not merely a tale of guns and glory. It was a complex tapestry of confidence, underestimation, and potentially catastrophic outcomes. As he wandered through the encampment, John's thoughts whirled with the possibility of what lay ahead for both sides. Before long, John found himself at the edge of a makeshift tent, where a small group of officers stood gathered in intense discussion. Among them was Lieutenant Takashi Yamamoto, a Japanese strategist who had somehow managed to find himself in the crosshairs of war correspondents. Even though he wore the enemy's uniform, John was drawn to the man's calm demeanor amidst the chaos. It was a rare opportunity, and John knew he couldn't let it slip away. "Excuse me, Lieutenant Yamamoto." John introduced himself, his voice steady despite the turmoil around them. "I'm a war correspondent, and I'd like to understand your perspective on the current situation. Can we talk?" Yamamoto looked at him, surprise flickering in his eyes, but there was no hesitation in his nod. "Very well. We can speak in private." The two men moved to a quieter area, away from the tumult of the command tent. The air felt thick with tension as they settled under the shade of a palm tree, the distant sounds of preparation blending into an ominous backdrop. John pulled out his notebook, ready to capture the essence of what would surely be a pivotal moment in his reporting. "Tell me about the Kantai-Kessen strategy," John began, his pen poised over the paper. "What do you believe gives the Japanese forces such confidence?" Yamamoto's eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing the gravity of his words. "The Kantai-Kessen is not just a plan, it is our conviction. We believe that with our superior numbers and strategic positioning, we can surprise the Americans. They underestimate our resolve and capability." John scribbled furiously, his mind racing with the implications of what Yamamoto was saying. But what if this confidence leads to overreach? The Americans are not to be taken lightly. "Confidence is often mistaken for arrogance," Yamamoto replied, his voice calm yet firm. "But our intelligence indicates that American forces are stretched thin. They have made miscalculations in our capabilities. We are prepared for this battle in ways they cannot comprehend." As John absorbed the strategist's words, he recognized a thread of pride woven into Yamamoto's tone. The Japanese forces were not merely fighting a war. They were fighting for their honor, their beliefs, and their very existence. John felt a knot of responsibility tightening in his chest. His role as a reporter was transforming. He was not just documenting a war, but revealing the human aspects behind the headlines. "Are you saying that there's a potential for a disaster on either side?" John pressed, intrigued by the complexity of Yamamoto's insights. Yamamoto hesitated, his gaze drifting to the horizon where the sun dipped low, casting shadows over the battlefield. "Every great plan has its risks. If the Americans fully grasp the potency of our strategy, it could lead to a devastating confrontation. But we will not falter. We believe in our approach." John felt a surge of realization. The war was not just about weapons and tactical advantages. It was also a battle of perceptions and confidence. The Japanese were stepping into the fray with the conviction that their strategy would deliver them victory, while the Americans, buoyed by their resolve, were poised to dismantle that very confidence. "Lieutenant, I appreciate your candor," John said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts. "I must ask, do you believe your leaders are aware of the potential for disaster?" Yamamoto's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of doubt momentarily crossing his features. "Leadership often sees only what it wishes to see. Confidence blinds us to the lurking dangers, but we must act. Hesitation can be fatal." John nodded, a newfound respect emerging for his opponent. The complexity of the war was unfurling before him, revealing layers beyond the battlefield's bloodshed. This was about faith in strategy, the human spirit, and the dire consequences that could arise from misplaced confidence. Returning to the American camp, John's mind was ablaze with thoughts. He needed to delve deeper into American intelligence reports, to connect the insights he had gained from Yamamoto with the realities faced by his own forces. What if the American leadership was indeed underestimating their adversary? As he moved through the camp, the voices of soldiers around him became a murmur in the background, their laughter and banter tinged with an undercurrent of anxiety. He spotted Captain Thornton again, poring over maps with an air of intensity. "Captain, I need to speak with you," John said, urgency threading through his words. "I just had a conversation with Lieutenant Yamamoto." Thornton looked up, interest piqued. "What did he say?" John took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts like a soldier preparing for battle. "He believes that the Japanese forces are confident in their strategy and that they think we are underestimating them. This could have dire consequences." Thornton's brow furrowed. "That's unsettling. We've been operating under the assumption that their overconfidence would be their downfall." "Exactly," John pressed. "But what if that assumption leads us into a trap? We need to reassess our intelligence and prepare for the unexpected. The stakes are higher than we realize." Thornton's demeanor shifted as he considered John's words. "You may be onto something, Smith. We cannot afford to overlook any possibility." It was decided then John would dive into the depths of American intelligence reports, bringing the voices of battle-hardened soldiers to the forefront. The enemy's confidence might very well signal their own impending downfall, or it could lead to a catastrophe that neither side could afford. "Keep your eyes and ears open," Thornton instructed, determination igniting his tone. "The truth is a weapon, and we need every advantage we can find." As John walked away, the weight of his responsibility settled upon him like a heavy cloak. The war was not merely a series of battles, it was a collision of ideologies, confidence, and the fragile human spirit. His journey was just beginning, and he was determined to uncover the story that lay beneath the surface, one that would resonate far beyond the echoes of gunfire. "Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more insights and tales from the front lines," he thought, a small, determined smile creeping onto his lips. In the midst of chaos, he would wield his words like weapons, illuminating the truths hidden in the shadows of war. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting a deep indigo shadow over the encampment, John Smith felt a sense of urgency prickling at his skin. The conversation with Lieutenant Yamamoto had unveiled a world of confidence and conviction, yet it also left a heavy weight on his conscience. The miscalculations of the American command loomed large like a storm cloud, threatening to unleash chaos upon both sides. With newfound determination surging through him, John sought to uncover the truth behind the fabrications and discrepancies that plagued American intelligence about Japanese troop movements. He returned to the main command tent, where officers were bustling about, their faces etched with the concentration of impending war. John's heart raced as he approached Captain Thornton. "Sir, I believe we may be missing critical information about the Japanese forces. Their intelligence could be far more advanced than we realize," he asserted, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. Captain Thornton paused, his brow furrowing in contemplation. "What are you suggesting, Smith, that we've underestimated them?" "The Japanese have been preparing for this moment. Yamamoto has expressed confidence in their strategy, and I fear our intelligence is outdated," John replied, leaning closer. "If we don't act upon this information, we risk walking into a trap of our own making." Thornton regarded John with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. "You're suggesting we alter our strategies based on a single conversation?" "Not just that, sir. We have to delve deeper. I've heard murmurs from the ranks, officers concerned about the intelligence reports." John's desperation to be heard was palpable. He could feel the stakes rising with each word. With a heavy sigh, Thornton gestured for John to follow him into a private corner of the tent, away from prying ears. "All right, Smith. What do you propose? How do you intend to get to the bottom of this?" John's mind raced with possibilities. "We need to gather insights from those that have been stationed here longer, those who might have seen the Japanese movements firsthand. There's a risk of complacency if we continue to rely solely on outdated reports. If we can corroborate Yamamoto's claims with new intelligence from our own men, we could form a clearer picture." Thornton nodded, his expression softening as he considered John's words. "You may have a point. We'll need to act quickly. There isn't much time before the battle begins." With a renewed sense of purpose, John set off to find allies among the officers stationed at the encampment. He approached Lieutenant Harris, a veteran officer whose experience and keen eye for detail had earned him the respect of his peers. "Lieutenant," John began, his tone earnest, "I need your help. I've spoken with a Japanese strategist, and it seems our intelligence is riddled with inaccuracies." Harris raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "What do you mean? Are you implying we've been misled?" "Yes," John replied, urgency creeping into his voice. "They're preparing for a significant confrontation, and I fear we're grossly underestimating their capabilities. If we don't reevaluate our strategy, we could face disastrous consequences." Harris ran a hand through his hair, clearly grappling with the weight of John's revelation. "I've sensed a shift in the morale of the troops. Some believe we're merely awaiting victory, but I've seen movements at night, patterns that suggest something more ominous. If you're right, we need to act fast." Together they gathered a small group of concerned officers who echoed the same sentiments. As the discussions intensified, John felt the tide of awareness shift within the ranks. There was an urgency to reassess the intelligence reports, to confront the possibility that the Japanese forces were not just a formidable opponent, but a cunning adversary capable of turning the tide of war. As John and the officers exchanged information late into the night, the atmosphere shifted from one of complacency to one of vigilance. They scrutinized maps and troop movements, weighing every piece of information against the backdrop of Yamamoto's confident declarations. John's heart raced as he realized the impact of their findings could redefine their approach to the impending battle. "Look here." Harris pointed to a section of the map where Japanese forces were rumored to be regrouping. "If they consolidate their strength here, we could be flanked before we even realize it." John nodded fervently, his pulse quickening. "Exactly. If we can relay this information to command, we might just stand a fighting chance." As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, the officers felt the weight of their new responsibility. John knew that the fight was no longer just about reporting the war. It was about ensuring the survival of their comrades on the battlefield. They had to act quickly. "Let's get this information up the chain of command," John urged the group. "We can't afford to let our leaders underestimate the Japanese any longer. The time for action is now." With determination igniting their spirits, the officers set forth to deliver their findings, leaving John to ponder the gravity of their discovery. The stakes had never been higher, and with each step he felt the weight of truth bearing down upon him. The Japanese plan, once thought to be a mere confidence, was now revealed to be a dangerous underestimation of their capabilities. As John prepared to send his report, a sense of dread washed over him. The battle ahead would not merely be fought with weapons, but with the very perceptions that shaped each side's strategies. He knew he had to share the changing tides of intelligence with the world beyond the battlefield, a narrative that could alter the course of history. "Before you go," Harris said, his voice steady yet reflective, "you must ensure this message reaches those who need it most. The lives of our men depend on it." John nodded, his resolve firm. "I will make sure they hear our warnings." With that, he set his sights on the command tent once more, ready to navigate the storm of chaos ahead. And as he moved forward, he couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility growing heavier on his shoulders. The truth was now more than just information. It was a lifeline, and John was determined to ensure that it would not be overlooked. Before we continue this gripping tale, make sure to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on John Smith's journey through the chaos of war and the untold stories that shape our understanding of history. Don't miss out on what comes next. As the moon climbed higher in the night sky, casting a silvery glow over the encampment, John Smith felt the weight of urgency pressing against his chest. He now realized the full extent of the situation. Misjudgments could cost lives, and perhaps even the war itself. He had gathered a small group of officers who were beginning to see the cracks in the American intelligence reports, but now he needed to escalate the matter further. "Gentlemen," John addressed the group, his voice steady yet urgent. "We need to take this to the top. If we're right about the Japanese preparations, we cannot afford to wait any longer." The officers nodded in agreement, their expressions mirroring the gravity of the moment. Lieutenant Harris stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "But how do we relay this information? Captain Thornton seems open to our concerns, but higher command might not share the same perspective." John took a deep breath, his mind racing. "We need to compile everything we've learned into a concise report. If we present it with firm evidence from the field, it might compel them to listen." His pulse quickened at the thought of the potential fallout. A delayed response could lead us into a trap set by the very confidence we've been warned about. The officers began to discuss their observations, sharing bits of information that John meticulously noted down. Despite the chaos around them, the atmosphere was charged with a newfound energy. They were no longer mere spectators. They were strategists, united in a common purpose. As they finalized their report, John felt a ripple of determination surge through him. "Let's move quickly. We need to present this to Captain Thornton and urge him to escalate it immediately." The officers nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. They approached Captain Thornton, who was poring over maps spread out on a table. "Sir," John began, urgency lacing his tone, "we've gathered additional insights into the Japanese movements that require immediate attention." Thornton looked up, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern as he gestured for them to continue. John plunged into the details, articulating their findings with fervor. "Based on our discussions, it's clear that the Japanese are planning something significant. Their movements suggest that they are ready for a confrontation, and if we don't take this seriously, we may find ourselves outmaneuvered." The captain's brow furrowed further. "What makes you so certain, Smith? This isn't just a matter of speculation." John leaned closer, the fire of conviction igniting in his voice. "We've corroborated Lieutenant Yamamoto's claims with our own observations. There's a palpable shift in their morale, and it's evident they're not simply waiting for an attack. They're preparing for one." Thornton's gaze shifted to the officers behind John, who nodded in confirmation. "Very well," he said, rubbing his temples in thought. "What do you suggest we do?" John took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of his words. "We need to alert higher command and request additional reconnaissance. If we can gather real-time intelligence, we can devise a counter-offensive that doesn't just react to their strategy, but anticipates it." Thornton's expression softened slightly. He was beginning to see the merit in their proposal. "I can't promise immediate action, but I can escalate this to the division commander. In the meantime, I want you all to stay vigilant. Gather any information you can from the ranks." As John stepped away from the captain's tent, a sense of urgency propelled him forward. The night air was thick with tension, and he knew that every passing moment counted. He turned to his fellow officers. "We can't stop now. We must keep our eyes and ears open. If we can gather more evidence, it might shift the tide in our favor." Just as they began to disperse, a soldier rushed toward them, his breath coming in heaves. "Lieutenant Smith, you need to see this." John's heart raced as he followed the soldier to a small gathering of troops. There, in the flickering light of a lantern, lay a series of maps, hastily drawn on a tattered piece of cloth. "What is this?" John asked, kneeling beside the soldier. "Intel from a scout," the soldier replied, his voice trembling. "They spotted movement near the supply lines. Japanese troops are mobilizing in larger numbers than we anticipated." John's mind raced as he studied the maps. This new information was explosive. "We need to get this back to Captain Thornton immediately," he urged, rising to his feet. The soldier's eyes widened. "But, sir, there's more. They're setting up fortifications along our expected route of advance. If we proceed as planned, we'll walk right into their trap." A chill ran down John's spine as the reality of the situation hit him. "We need to warn the captain. We can't let our forces walk into a slaughter." With the soldier leading the way, John rushed back to the command tent, anxiety churning in his gut. Captain Thornton was already poring over the maps with his officers when John burst in. "Sir, we have urgent new intelligence." Thornton looked up, concern etching lines into his forehead as John presented the maps. "If we proceed with our current strategy, we'll be outflanked. We need to change course immediately." The tension in the tent escalated as Thornton studied the maps, weighing their options. "This changes everything," he murmured, glancing at the assembled officers. "We must devise a new plan, a counter-offensive that anticipates their movements." John felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment they had been preparing for. "We need to act fast, sir. Timing is everything." As they delved into strategy discussions, John's heart raced. The stakes had never been higher, and he felt the weight of each decision pressing down on him. The war was not just a series of battles, it was a game of wits, and they were determined to outsmart their adversary. As the discussion continued, John's thoughts drifted back to Lieutenant Yamamoto's confidence. The Japanese had not only anticipated American movements, they had prepared for them meticulously. This realization deepened John's resolve to ensure that the American forces would not underestimate their foe again. Before the night was over, they would forge a new plan, one that would hopefully turn the tide of battle. It was a race against time, and John Smith was determined to lead the charge toward victory. As the clock ticked closer to dawn, John's voice rose above the murmurs of strategy. "We cannot afford to be complacent. It's time we take the fight to them." With that, a chorus of agreement surged through the tent. The air crackled with determination, and John knew that they were on the precipice of a crucial turning point. He felt a sense of purpose surge through him, a purpose that would carry them into the heart of the storm that awaited. But even as they prepared for battle, another thought lingered in John's mind. Was this truly enough to counter the confident Japanese plan that had already ensnared many before them? The answer lay just beyond the horizon, where the dawn would soon break, heralding either triumph or disaster. As the meeting adjourned, John turned to the gathered officers, his heart racing with anticipation. "Let's move fast, gentlemen. We have a war to win." And with that, they set forth into the night, determined to change the course of history before the sun rose again. If you want to follow John Smith's journey through this harrowing time and discover what happens next, be sure to subscribe to our channel for the next chapter of this gripping story. As John Smith followed the soldier through the dimly lit pathways of the encampment, a sense of dread settled in the pit of his stomach. The urgency in the soldier's voice had been palpable, a siren call that propelled John forward. Each step echoed the unyielding reality that time was slipping away, and so much rested on their ability to act swiftly and decisively. Upon reaching the command tent, the soldier gestured for John to enter. Inside, a small group of officers was huddled around a table covered with intelligence reports, their voices hushed but intense. John's heart raced as he stepped inside, and all eyes turned toward him, curiosity and concern mingling in the air. "Lieutenant Smith," one of the officers, Major Caldwell, said, "You've got to hear this." The tension in the room escalated as Caldwell handed John a hastily scrawled note. "A scout stumbled upon something critical. It seems the Japanese fleet is mobilizing in a way we haven't anticipated. They're preparing for a surprise attack, possibly on our supply lines." John's mind raced as he absorbed the information. "What do you mean, mobilizing? Are they moving ships?" His voice was steady, but inside, a whirlwind of thoughts was swirling. This was the confirmation they had been fearing, the very trap they needed to warn against. Caldwell nodded, his expression serious. "We have reports that they've increased their naval patrols and are gathering forces near Midway. They believe the confidence from Kantai Kessen will lead them to victory, and they're ready to strike." John felt the weight of that revelation. Kantai Kessen, an overwhelming, decisive battle, was not just a strategy. It was a philosophy that epitomized the Japanese military mindset. They believed in their superiority and were poised to capitalize on any sign of weakness. "We need to get this information to Captain Thornton immediately," John urged. As they rushed to find Thornton, John's mind was racing through the implications. If the Japanese were indeed poised for an attack, they had precious little time to prepare a counter-strategy. "What's our best course of action?" he asked Caldwell as they moved. "We can't afford a bureaucratic delay." Major Caldwell, maintaining his composure, suggested, "We need to bypass the usual channels If we can gather enough evidence and get it in front of the division commander directly, we might prevent a disaster. John's thoughts spun. Bypassing protocol was a dangerous gambit, but the stakes were far too high. "Let's do it," he said, determination surging within him. "We'll compile everything into a brief but powerful report. If we can appeal to their sense of urgency, we might stand a chance." They reached Captain Thornton's tent and John knocked urgently. "Sir, we have critical information." Thornton opened the flap, looking visibly worn but alert. "What is it, Smith?" John stepped forward, the atmosphere electric with gravity. "Sir, the Japanese are mobilizing. We have reports of increased naval movements and preparations for an attack on our supply lines. We believe they're planning to exploit our confidence." He handed the note from Caldwell to Thornton. "We need to act now. We must alert higher command and request immediate reconnaissance." Thornton scanned the note, his brow furrowing deeper. "If this is true, we're looking at a significant threat. But how do you know this? What evidence do you have?" John felt a surge of frustration, but remained composed. "We have corroboration from multiple scouts and reports. Their movements suggest a high level of preparedness. This isn't mere speculation." Thornton closed his eyes for a moment, weighing the gravity of the situation. "Very well, but I need more than just your word for this. I need concrete evidence." "Then we gather it," John insisted. "We need to mobilize our reconnaissance units. If we can get visual confirmation of their fleet, it will validate our findings." Thornton nodded slowly, absorbing John's urgency. "All right. I'll relay this to the division commander, but I can't promise immediate action. You all must prepare for the worst in the meantime." John felt a mix of relief and anxiety wash over him. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but they were finally acting rather than merely reacting. As he stepped away from Thornton's tent, the reality of impending conflict loomed large in his mind. "Gather the men," John instructed Caldwell and the others. "We need to set up a watch along the coast. Every detail counts." As they moved to execute their plan, John felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. The encampment was abuzz with activity, soldiers preparing themselves for a battle that felt increasingly imminent. The sights and sounds of the military machine in motion only heightened his resolve. In the following hours, John coordinated with various units, ensuring that every soldier understood the critical nature of their mission. Each report that came in was met with scrutiny, and every piece of intelligence was weighed against the growing sense of urgency. The sun began to rise, illuminating the horizon with hues of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the grim realities they faced. John stood atop a small hill, gazing at the expanse of the ocean, the waves crashing rhythmically against the shore. It was a moment of peace that felt almost surreal, considering the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. Suddenly, a shout echoed from below, breaking his reverie. "Lieutenant, over here!" A scout had returned, breathless and wide-eyed. John rushed down to meet him. "What did you find?" "They're coming, sir. We spotted an entire fleet moving, dozens of ships heading our way." John's heart sank, but there was no time for fear. "Prepare the men. We need to be ready to defend our position. This is the moment we've been preparing for." As the realization of the imminent confrontation settled over him, John recalled the urgency of his mission, to warn the American forces of the impending disaster. The stakes had never been higher, but now they had the evidence they needed. With a newfound sense of purpose, John Smith stood tall, ready to face the storm head-on. The Japanese might have felt confident, but the American spirit was unyielding. This battle would be more than a clash of arms, it would be a test of wills. And as the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, John knew that victory would belong to those who dared to confront their fears. "Stay alert, gentlemen," he called to his fellow officers. "This is just the beginning." With every passing moment, the American forces prepared to meet their fate, and John understood that his role in this unfolding drama was crucial. The world was watching, and he was determined to write a story of resilience and courage. As tension mounted, John couldn't help but feel that this was the moment that would define not just his career, but the entire course of the war. So, if you want to follow John's journey through the chaos of war and see how this pivotal moment unfolds, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories of courage and determination coming your way. As the air thickened with tension, John Smith stood at the precipice of chaos. The dim light of the command tent flickered, illuminating the faces of military officers who had exchanged their confidence for concern. Captain Thornton, having just absorbed the gravity of the situation, turned to the assembled team. "We need to act. Time is not our ally," he declared, his voice cutting through the murmur of uncertainty. John felt the rush of adrenaline course through him. "I'll coordinate the reconnaissance units," he asserted, stepping forward with a newfound sense of purpose. This was no longer just a matter of reporting. He was now a crucial link in the chain of command, a bridge between the chaotic battlefield and the strategists in the tent. With a nod from Thornton, he sprinted toward the communications hub, determined to gather the intel they so desperately needed. As he dashed through the encampment, John's mind raced. The Japanese fleet was more than just ships on a horizon. It represented a calculated gamble born of overconfidence. He recalled the words of Lieutenant Yamamoto, the enemy's conviction almost palpable in the way he spoke. They believed they could overwhelm the Americans, and John realized they had underestimated the resolve of those who fought for their homeland. "Lieutenant Smith," a voice called from behind. It was Lieutenant Harris, his expression a mixture of urgency and fear. "We've just intercepted a transmission. It confirms that the Japanese forces are moving towards our supply lines as we speak." John's heart sank. "We need to alert the fleet immediately. If we can redirect our ships, we might minimize the damage," he urged, his voice steady despite the panic creeping in from the corners of his mind. Together they rushed to the communications tent where the air was electric with frantic activity. Operators were clattering away at their machines, relaying coded messages back and forth. John approached the chief operator, a seasoned man named Sergeant Davis. "We need to send an urgent communication to Admiral Nimitz. The Japanese are about to strike, and we have no time to lose." Davis's fingers paused mid-type, his eyes widening. "Are you certain of this, Smith? We can't send out a message without concrete proof." "I know it sounds crazy," John replied, fighting against the doubt that was starting to creep into his own mind. "But we have multiple reports confirming their movements. If we wait for more evidence, it may be too late. We can't afford to underestimate them." After a moment of hesitation, Davis nodded. "All right, I'll get the message out. But you'd better hope you're right." As the message was sent, a sense of foreboding settled over John. He couldn't shake the feeling that the Japanese were already on the move, and their confidence had transformed into a dangerous weapon. Hours passed, filled with frantic preparations and whispered fears. John watched as soldiers and officers scrambled to fortify positions and gather supplies. The atmosphere was charged. Everyone felt the impending storm. With each passing minute, John's resolve solidified. He was no longer just an observer documenting history. He was an active participant, shaping the outcome of this battle. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the perimeter. "Incoming aircraft!" John's heart raced as he followed the sound of chaos erupting outside. Soldiers dove for cover, and the air was filled with the thundering roar of engines. He rushed to the edge of the encampment, where the sky was darkened by a swarm of Japanese bombers. "Get to your positions," John shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. "We need anti-aircraft units deployed now." As weapons were hastily manned, John felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. He was an unlikely leader, But the fear that gripped him transformed into determination. He knew that communication had been the flaw in the Japanese strategy. They had relied too heavily on their initial confidence without adapting to the evolving battlefield. The first wave of enemy bombers descended, unleashing their payloads. Explosions erupted around the encampment, sending debris flying and soldiers scrambling for safety. John ducked behind a makeshift barricade, his heart pounding in his chest. The chaos of war had come for them, and he felt the gravity of each second ticking away. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw a formation of American fighters soaring into the fray. They swooped in, guns blazing, engaging the enemy with a fierce tenacity that echoed John's own resolve. It was a dance of survival, an unyielding battle against the odds. As the fighting raged on, John's instincts as a reporter kicked in. He moved among the troops, documenting their bravery, capturing the essence of this moment, a testament to American resilience. He spoke to soldiers, encouraging them to keep fighting, to hold their ground. They were not just defending their supplies, they were fighting for each other and for the very ideals they cherished. Hours turned into an eternity as the battle unfolded. With each passing hour, it became clear that the Japanese underestimated the American resolve. The attack, initially meticulous in its design, began to unravel under the weight of determined resistance. The Americans adapted, countering each strike with ingenuity and bravery. As night fell, the sounds of battle began to wane. John stood among the remaining forces, battered but unbroken. The encampment, though scarred, stood resilient. He realized that the true victory lay not just in defeating the enemy, but in the bonds forged amidst chaos, the communication and intelligence that had allowed them to turn the tide. "Lieutenant Smith," Thornton approached, weariness etched in his features. "You did well today. Your warning saved lives." John nodded, understanding that the battle was far from over. "But we must learn from this. Intelligence is our greatest weapon now." As he looked around at the faces of his fellow soldiers, he knew that this experience had changed him. He was no longer just a reporter. He was a vital part of this machine, and he understood the weight of that responsibility. As the stars twinkled above, John felt a sense of purpose ignite within him. The war was far from over, but they had survived this day. And as he prepared for the challenges that lay ahead, he realized that the true essence of warfare was not merely in the battles fought, but in the stories shared and the lessons learned. Want to witness more gripping tales from the front lines and the lessons history has to teach us? Subscribe to the channel and join us as we delve deeper into the heart of the Second World War, exploring the moments that shaped our world. Don't miss out on the stories that echo through time. As the dust settled in the aftermath of the battle, John Smith took a moment to reflect on the chaos that had just unfolded. The once mighty Japanese fleet, brimming with confidence and strategic arrogance, had been met with an unwavering American resolve that turned the tide of conflict in the Pacific. The sound of distant explosions still echoed in his ears, a grim reminder of the price of underestimating an opponent. Victory was never guaranteed, John thought, his mind racing through the events that had led to this moment. The Japanese had believed their elaborate plan would secure dominance over the Pacific, yet they had walked straight into a trap, one meticulously laid out by the American forces. It was a poignant lesson in the complexities of war. Overconfidence often breeds failure. John observed the weary faces of the soldiers around him, their expressions a mix of relief and disbelief. They had fought valiantly, but the scars of battle were etched deep into their souls. Each man and woman bore witness to the horrors of war, and John felt a profound responsibility to capture their stories, to ensure the world understood the true cost of conflict. Captain Thornton approached John, his demeanor a blend of exhaustion and triumph. "We did it, Smith. We turned their confidence against them," he stated, a hint of pride in his voice. John nodded, recognizing the weight of their victory. It was a crucial turning point in the Pacific War, one that would reverberate through history, altering the course of events for both nations. "Captain, it's imperative we document this," John urged, his journalist instincts igniting. "The world needs to know how miscalculations can lead to disaster, and how the human spirit can rise against overwhelming odds." Thornton's eyes narrowed as he considered John's words. "You're right. This isn't just a military victory. It's a story of resilience, of people who dared to confront their fears." As they walked through the encampment, John felt a surge of gratitude for the soldiers who had stood firm in the face of adversity. He listened intently to their accounts of bravery and sacrifice, each story a thread woven into the larger tapestry of war. It was in these moments that John understood the complex dynamics of human nature, fear intertwined with courage, despair mingling with hope. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, John sat down to pen his reflections. He wrote about the Japanese strategy, highlighting their reliance on confidence and the fatal flaw it had created. "In war, as in life, it is often the unseen variables that dictate outcomes," he mused. The Japanese had underestimated the resolve of the Americans, and that miscalculation had cost them dearly. John's thoughts turned to Lieutenant Yamamoto, whose words still resonated within him. The enemy had believed in their superiority, yet they had overlooked a crucial aspect of warfare: the unpredictability of human will. It was this very will that had turned the tide of battle, and John felt a deep sense of respect for both the soldiers who fought and the civilians who endured. As he concluded his writing, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was not merely a chronicler of events, he was a voice for those who had fought and fallen. The narratives he crafted would serve as a reminder of the lessons learned on the battlefield, a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity. In the days that followed, the news of the American victory spread like wildfire. The tides of war had shifted, and the implications were profound. The Japanese, once seen as an unstoppable force, had been humbled. Their confidence, once a weapon against their enemies, now lay shattered, a cautionary tale for future strategists. John knew he had to share this story with the world. It was not just about the battle. It was about understanding the complexities of conflict, the interplay of strategy and human emotion. The lessons learned on that day would echo throughout history, a reminder that overconfidence can lead to ruin. As he prepared to leave the encampment, John felt a sense of urgency. "We must ensure our audience understands the truth of this war," he told Captain Thornton. "This isn't just about glory, it's about the sacrifices made and the lives forever changed." The captain nodded, recognizing the importance of John's mission. "Let's make sure we get the message out," Thornton replied, the fire of determination rekindled in his eyes. "The world needs to know what happened here." As John boarded the transport ship bound for the mainland, he took one last look at the encampment, a place that had witnessed both horror and heroism. The battles fought here would shape the narrative of the Pacific War, and he was determined to be the one to tell it. "Remember this moment," he whispered to himself, "and the lessons it holds." He felt a surge of responsibility as a journalist, a storyteller who would ensure the voices of the past were not forgotten. As the ship sailed away, John couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The complexities of war would continue to unfold, and he would be there to document every twist and turn. There were more stories to tell, more truths to uncover, and he was ready to face them head-on. If you've enjoyed this story and want to delve deeper into the truths of history and the complexities of war, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Join me as we explore the narratives that shape our understanding of the past, and together, let's unravel the threads of history. Your journey into the heart of conflict begins here.